everybody, I'm Jammer, and E3 2021 is right around the corner. We've had a long-standing tradition on this channel where we talk predictions and all the stuff that we may expect to see Nintendo show off in their directs, presentations, and the big event, of course, being E3. We're gonna go through a couple of things that I expect to see at this year's E3. We're gonna go through a couple of things that were rumored and potentially talk about the validity of those rumors and what could make sense for them to show off, and then some other smaller miscellaneous predictions. That all being said, if you have any predictions of your own, I'd love to hear that in the comments below of this video. Let's get the discussion going. Let's start getting excited for what we may see at E3. Oh yeah, and before we get started, if you are new here, perhaps consider subscribing because you can expect tons more on Nintendo and E3 coverage. We're gonna live stream it, react to it, do a bunch of videos on the games that are announced and stuff. Should be a lot of fun. Now, with that all being said, I present to you my predictions for the Nintendo E3 2021 presentation directly to you. I think it's finally time to see some more Breath of the Wild 2. The last time we saw Breath of the Wild 2 was E3 2019, 2 years prior, as E3 was not held last year. During the last Nintendo Direct we got earlier this year, when they got to the Zelda section, they briefly mentioned, hey yeah, so no new Breath of the Wild 2 news, sorry about that, but you can look forward to some more information later on. And if any place for Nintendo to show off some new gameplay, some new trailer for Breath of the Wild 2, it would be here at E3. I think it's likely we'll finally get a new trailer, maybe actually see some real gameplay this time and not just some teaser. And I really feel like we might finally get a release date for the game. I want it to be holiday this year, but at the same time, my heart says it might be next year, which makes sense. Considering everything that happened last year, delays are bound to happen. Perhaps maybe it was planned for this year's holiday, and it could be still the case. But I think it's more likely if they announce any sort of release date, it would just be 2022. But at least in this trailer, we'll get some new gameplay, we'll see some new stuff. I really look forward to seeing what the setting is going to be of this game. Where is Breath of the Wild 2 going to take place? So if the game isn't going to come out this year, and if they plan to show off at all in any sort of capacity this year, this is going to be the place to see it. But speaking of Zelda, the other Wii U remakes. I feel like this is a tricky situation. I don't know if this is going to necessarily be at E3, but it's worth quickly talking about before we move on from Zelda. On one hand, I think it's inevitable for those games coming to Switch, because for one thing, it's free money. Those games can come over as direct ports, and people are going to eat them up. I know I'll happily buy them both again. But on the other hand, I don't know if they want to push focus away from the Skyward Sword remake. Since the Skyward Sword remake is going to be coming a few days after the Nintendo E3 Direct presentation, feels kind of weird if they start advertising the next remakes to be coming to Switch. Not everyone can buy every game, so if like multiple Zelda games release in a row, people will have to make a choice between one or the other. So it's in Nintendo's best interest to release them more in a staggered release, have focus be on Skyward Sword, and perhaps that be the only Zelda game that comes out this year. But I do think it's likely we'll see Wind Waker and Twilight Princess eventually on Switch, but it might not be here. Is it time for a new Animal Crossing update? The Animal Crossing community has been dying for some sort of big new update coming to New Horizons. There's been a lot of fake rumors and leaks of people spinning around ideas of Brewster, Tortimer's Island, a really big 2.0 update coming to New Horizons, with not really much evidence backing it, unfortunately. It makes sense why fans are thinking this, because if you look back at the past couple of updates that have come to the game, they've all been smaller. There was the Festival update in January that was just one simple holiday. There was the San Reno update that was just a collection of amiibo and new characters. There was the Mario update that was really just a handful of some new furniture pieces. So if any sort of big update is going to come to Animal Crossing New Horizons, this is going to be the place to show it off. Sure, Animal Crossing can always post their own trailers, have their own events, and have plenty of people watch the trailer, but this is the place to announce something big. I don't think they're ready for any necessarily new Animal Crossing game, whether a spin-off or anything of that nature, but I do think if there is any sort of big Animal Crossing update coming, this is going to be the place to show it off. And if E3 comes and goes and there's no Animal Crossing trailer, it might be smart to start setting expectations that, you know, the content's going to be a lot slower for the rest of the updates coming to that game. One game I don't think we'll see at all is Splatoon 3. Since the game is so early in development and they announced the release date isn't until next year, I feel like it doesn't really make sense to see Splatoon 3 again here at E3 because it's so far off. It makes a lot more sense for Nintendo to showcase games that are coming out a lot sooner, get people excited for games that are coming out in a more recent time frame so then they can look forward to buying those. I can't really imagine what else they could show off for Splatoon 3 with the games being so far out as well as being so early in development. Like, what good would the game do to see more of it when it's not going to come out for like probably another year? While of course I'm excited for it and do want to see it again, I just don't think it's likely that it's going to happen here at E3. Alright, so those are some of my safe predictions I feel like that are going to make a lot of sense for this E3 here, but let's start talking about some of the games that have been rumored to potentially be shown off here at E3 2021. Could a new 2D Metroid be coming to Switch? In this big rumor, one of the big ones that were talked about was a rumored new 2D Metroid game, in which the rumor says that the game's apparently done in development, just waiting to be announced and released for that matter. Which, if that's the case, that isn't totally irregular, because if you look back when Samus Returns was announced for the 3DS, it was announced over E3 and released only a few months later. So perhaps it could be a similar situation here, where the game is announced at E3, then comes out a few months later in September. As a Metroid fan, I couldn't be more excited for the series to be making its return, but also getting the opportunity it deserves. To be sold to the massive audience that is Switch owners, giving the opportunity for this IP, for this series to really flourish, and then we can hopefully see more Metroid games down the road. But speaking of Metroid, there's another game fans have been looking forward to. We haven't seen Metroid Prime 4, really at all ever. There was the announcement teaser at E3 2017, then a few years back they announced that the development of the game is being restarted because it wasn't going the direction that they were hoping the project would. It's been a few years since that announcement, and so they could be in a good place to show off the game again. I don't know if necessarily I want to make a prediction on this necessarily, because I feel like it's still probably a ways off. Realistically, I guess it could come out next year, roughly, so maybe this is a good time to give another sneak peek at the game, but it still is a ways off, and there could be a lot of other games that make more sense to show off sooner, since they're going to be coming out a lot sooner. And especially if there is a 2D Metroid apparently nearly done, that makes more sense to focus more on that game and get fans excited for that to be buying it within the next couple of months. There's one more Metroid game that's been rumored. Is the Metroid Prime trilogy finally coming to Switch? We've heard people talk about the rumored Metroid Prime trilogy coming to Switch in a remastered format. We've been hearing rumors about this remake for years now. Matter of fact, it was the same rumor that initially leaked the Skyward Sword remake that apparently Nintendo was working on that on the sidelines. And it's been a few years since that original rumor came out, and now look, Skyward Sword is coming out in a matter of months. I think it would make so much sense for the Metroid series to have the Prime trilogy on Switch in a remake format, because it would be such a benefit to the series itself, get a ton of new fans into the Metroid series, but also it's a great way to get people excited for Metroid Prime 4 when inevitably that'll come to the console. I'm a huge Metroid Prime fan, and I would love to replay these games on Switch in full HD and everything, and I think it would be a great place to really revitalize the Metroid series. I don't want to get my hopes too much up for Metroid here at E3. We already talked about now 3 games, potentially rumored, leaked, and whatever, that could be coming to Switch, which is kind of a lot more focused than Nintendo ever gives this series. But that all being said, who knows? I think all 3 of these games make sense eventually coming to Switch. Whether we'll see them at this year's E3 or not, I'm not entirely sure. Moving on, another new Fire Emblem is rumored to be coming to Switch. Fire Emblem Three Houses has now been out for a little over 2 years, and because of the moneymaker that is the Fire Emblem series and how much Nintendo does quite frequently output new iterations of this series, I think it's very well likely to assume that Intelligent Systems, the studio that worked on Fire Emblem Three Houses, is definitely working and well into development of their next new Fire Emblem project. Take a look at the 3DS and how quickly they would pump out new Fire Emblem games on a nearly annual basis. And so I think it's definitely about time for us to see some sort of new Fire Emblem project, and speaking of which, with this big E3 rumor, one of the games that was rumored was a potential new remake of Genealogy of the Holy War. This is a game that never was localized outside of Japan, that was released back on the Famicom, or the Super Nintendo here in the States. And apparently, according to the rumor, that is near completion, meaning we could maybe even see it come out this year. Announced at E3, maybe come out later in the fall, similar kind of time frame to when Three Houses came out. The last Fire Emblem remake they made was Fire Emblem Echoes, back on the 3DS, and it could make sense they could go back to that format where they make a brand new game, and then they go make their next remake. Like how they made Fire Emblem Fates, then they made Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, the remake, and then they made Fire Emblem Three Houses, so I guess another remake wouldn't be too crazy of a prediction to have. Either way, whether it's a brand new Fire Emblem or a remake, it's essentially going to be a brand new experience for us players in the West anyways. And besides, since Genealogy of the Holy War is so old, if that's the game that they're remaking, they can take a ton of creative liberties to make it an entirely new experience, just with really character names in common. I was so impressed by Fire Emblem Three Houses and all the new systems that they introduced in that game, and I can't wait to see them iterate upon that gameplay formula and see what else they can do and how they're going to push the series. So whether it's going to be a brand new game or this supposed rumored remake, I think it is quite likely that we're going to be seeing a new Fire Emblem game here at E3, or at least eventually coming later down the road. Another rumored game is a new 2D Donkey Kong. Apparently, according to the rumor, this game is going to be separate from the Donkey Kong Country series. This will be a brand new Donkey Kong game in its totally own series. I don't know how I really feel about this necessarily. I mean, maybe it just feels kind of like out of the blue, I guess, because it's not something I was really expecting going into this year's E3. But it technically is, you know, the anniversary of Donkey Kong, the 40th year anniversary, so I guess it makes sense a little bit to have some sort of Donkey Kong game to be celebrating it. Tying in another game that was talked later in this same rumor, that apparently another new 99 game is going to be announced, you know, in the same vein of like the Tetris 99, the Pac-Man 99. So instead of actually a brand new 2D Donkey Kong, maybe just a new 2D like Donkey Kong 99 or something along the lines of that. I don't know how much I'm feeling about this new Donkey Kong rumor. We could see something, but I'm not entirely sure. The last rumored game, Super Mario Party 2. This might be kind of an odd rumor since they just barely updated the original Super Mario Party to have board game mode playable online, which is a feature that should have been included in the base game. You could only ever play multiplayer minigames against friends and whatnot, which is kind of half the experience since you can't actually play the board game that brings the context of all these minigames together. So it might seem a little odd that they just barely updated the first game to come out with a second, but at the same time, it could also mean that the team working on 2 figured out an easy way to incorporate board game multiplayer online and just took that system over from 2 and implemented it into 1 before the release of 2. The rumor says here that this game potentially could be releasing this year holiday, which I think honestly makes a lot of sense for a new Mario Party. Of all things considered, the Mario Party series does typically have multiple iterations of the series on different consoles, so it isn't crazy to be getting 2 Mario Parties on the same home console. And the first game sold awesome. People love Mario Party. People eat that stuff up. So having a new game, a sequel, to iterate on the mechanics they introduced in the first game and make it even bigger than the first, I think is only going to be a great thing for this game and series and something I would love for them to do. Because in a way, the first game felt a little half-baked. I mean, there's only 4 boards, one of which is like has a really weird gimmick, so it kind of feels like there's only 3. Some of the other side mode stuff are fun for what they are, but there's nothing really like worth sinking a ton of time into. Really, my biggest critique for the longest time was not having online board game multiplayer, but now that that's there, that's really cool and fun. But I mean, only having 4 boards doesn't really add much variety to the gameplay. You could easily play half the board games in the entire game in one play session with your friends. I would love to see a new Mario Party sequel, and I think it's actually quite likely that we might see it here at E3. So before we wrap things up, let's talk about a couple of predictions I'm not nearly as confident about that I think are to be shown off here in E3. Some just kind of miscellaneous ideas they could be working on, we may or may not see here, but it's worth talking about nonetheless. It's been a while since we've seen our friend Kirby. Kirby Star Allies came out back in 2018, so it's been a bunch of years since we've seen a mainline Kirby game. Sure, there's been another couple of miscellaneous Kirby games throughout the past couple years. Even last year, there was the release of Kirby Fighters 2, a sequel to the 3DS like beat-em-up kind of Smash Bros-esque Kirby game. So we have seen Kirby throughout these past couple years, but there has been one big mainline title, and I think honestly, it's about time to see him again. Nintendo loves Kirby, fans love Kirby, these games sell really well, so I think seeing some sort of sequel or something to iterate upon the mechanics from Star Allies would be great to see. What I'd love to see is a Star Allies with some sort of online multiplayer, so it's not just local. That'd be so fun to be able to play a mainline Kirby game with a bunch of Kirbys or everyone playing as different enemies and stuff. I'm not nearly as confident about this prediction, but I think it is nearly about time to see something new Kirby related. Do you think they're working on Super Mario Odyssey 2? Again, this is an off-the-wall, I am not solid on this prediction whatsoever, but it has been a long time since the original release of Super Mario Odyssey, and we have seen some Mario games, you know, there was the 3D All-Star remakes, there was of course 3D World this year, as well as with the new Bowser's Fury mode, so there's been some new Mario content to play. In addition, if the Super Mario Party 2 rumor is true, we will be seeing something Mario here at E3. But man, I would just love to see myself a new Odyssey 2. Like, I would be shocked if the 3D Mario team wasn't working on it already. It might be too far off before it's ready, or maybe it's just like done and they're ready to just surprise us. But this could be like the big reveal, the big new announcement, and this is gonna come out in like October or November or something like that. I don't want to get my hopes up. I don't think it's necessarily probably going to happen because we've already talked about a lot of games in this video already. And even if half or more are true, we're already kind of running out of time of them to be able to show off new games. So I don't think it's necessarily time for Odyssey 2 as much as I'd love to see it, but I definitely think they're working on it and we will see it eventually, but maybe not just yet. Could we see something Xenoblade related? For the past couple of years, we've been getting new Xenoblade content all the time coming to Switch. We had Xenoblade 2, the release year of the Switch coming out. Torna, the DLC campaign that was later released as a standalone title, also came out the following year. Last year, of course, we got the ever-anticipated Xenoblade 1 remake that fans have been clamoring for Nintendo to do for so many years. And so if we see anything new Xenoblade related, there's two options left. Well, one of which, of course, is Xenoblade 3, which I hope they're working on. But I don't know if necessarily it's time, especially since Monolith is probably helping a lot with Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 right now, because since they helped a lot with the first game, so they might not have the resources to be working on an entirely brand new game at the same time. But as soon as I say that, they did release Xenoblade 2 and Breath of the Wild in the same year. So who really knows? They could be working on a Xenoblade 3. And maybe or maybe not, it might be time to show that game off, but what might be more likely to see, what I'd even hope for, is a port of Xenoblade X from the Wii U. I think it's a very safe prediction for that game to eventually come to Switch. I really think it deserves a second chance on Switch, because while it's a little bit more of a quirky title when it comes to Xenoblade games, it's still a really fun game, and I'd love to see that game get another chance here on Switch. Selfishly, more than anything, I just want to like replay Xenoblade X and not deal with the atrocious load times that was the Wii U. And so that could be a small little quick thing they insert in and be like, hey, Xenoblade X is coming. We're going to bring it out later this fall. Hope you look forward to it. Nothing to make a big deal about it. Insert it in a smaller section in the E3 presentation. So I don't totally want to get my hopes up for some like Xenoblade 3 announcement, but I do think like having something Xenoblade related in this E3 Direct would be likely some Xenoblade X port. And that's it. Those are all the predictions I have for E3 2021. But what do you think? Do you have any predictions for what Nintendo might show off this year at E3? Is there any games that I didn't talk about that you're hoping to see? Let me know in the comments below. Let's start a discussion talking about our E3 predictions and getting excited for the big event of the summer. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big awesome like. And if you haven't already, definitely subscribe for tons more on Nintendo and E3 2021 coverage. As a quick reminder, we do live stream every weekend at 10 a.m. Eastern, Saturdays and Sundays, playing a ton of different Nintendo Switch games, Animal Crossing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So definitely stop by those. Be sure to follow me over on my socials to keep up with everything we do in regards to the channel, as well as join our community Discord. It's a great place to find friends to play Nintendo Switch games with. Smash Bros, Splatoon, Animal Crossing. There's so many people active over there playing all the time, and I highly encourage you to check it out. Anyways, guys, I want to thank you again so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!